All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town Council Workshop on School Impact Fees. We have a full council here in attendance. This is obviously a timely topic, given the fact that the voters recently approved the school solution, and we're all cognizant of the need to mitigate the fiscal impact to taxpayers. And so with that, I will turn it over to staff for the presentation.
Sure. I'm pleased just to offer a couple of introductory comments. This discussion is part of a larger conversation that started well over a year ago. Last July in 2024, we totally revamped our traffic impact fees, did away with some of the older ones, put in place some new ones, also instituted for the first time a recreation impact fee. And there was some conversation at the time about possibly putting in an open space fee. We did not take action. That may be something we wish to consider as we go forward. As part of that conversation, the school impact fee has been around for 20 plus years. And obviously with the impending school project and uncertainty around whether that was going to move forward and what the amounts were and so on and so forth, we shelved this part of that conversation. And the Finance Committee picked it back up late summer, early fall, kind of worked with it. And then, of course, we had successful vote in November. So we're looking to bring this back as soon as we possibly could. Essentially, the methodologies that we've developed at the staff level and then vetted them through finance are the backbone of this. And we want to spend time tonight to bring the rest of the council along, understanding the methodology used and really what it results in terms of fees that we can apply for traffic school impacts. Karen Martin has been kind of the lead on this piece of the impact fees, and I'm pleased to kind of turn it over to her. I'll chime in on occasion as we go forward, but Karen is really the one that's put the bulk of the work toward this.
And Liam, if you don't mind pulling it up. And John, do you want to say anything? Okay. So as Tom said, it's time to rethink the school impact fees, because we have an additional set of bonds that are going to be funding the new school project. And so what I'm going to do tonight is walk you through the details of that, how we got to the total amount that we're going to use impact fees to repay, how we calculated them, and really just a couple of notes about methodology and where we're going to come through. And then at the end of this, we have a few questions that I think the Finance Committee really needed some feedback from the full council on, and we're hoping to leave that for your discussion. So first, I just want to remind everybody what impact fees are for. With respect to the school impact fee, we're allowed to charge new development a fee to pay back a certain portion of capital expenditures with respect to the schools. And that fee has to be related to both the a reasonable assumption about how much is assignable to new growth, and it's also needs to be reflective of how much growth you're expecting, and tying those two things together is how we get to the impact fee. So it can't pay for existing deficiencies. I think we've talked about that before. And so I'll show you how I got to the net new growth. And it also can't be used to deter growth. It may in fact deter growth because of the amount that we're going to be charging, but that can't be its purpose, because it's really, the purpose is to pay back the municipality for the bonds for the schools. So there are a couple of other things that are going on that I'll just highlight before we get started. One is we are doing a projection based on our existing rate of growth ordinance. As we all know from Anand's presentation 2 weeks ago, there are a lot of things up in the air. What might happen 1829 that may affect things. And my suggestion is you just move forward with the information that you have now. So there may be some recalculations that may have to happen in the future, and I'll point those out when we get to those pieces. But for now, you've got to start somewhere. And today is as good a day as any.
Just one other note I would say about impact fees, they cannot be used to offset operational expense. They're really intended for
Correct.
capital investment, bricks and mortar. That's a misconception very often, that we can attribute the same sort of methodology on the operational side, and that's simply not the case.
Correct, correct. And then the last thing I would say is there are some numbers that we're using that do use federal data points. And those data points originally were supposed to be released, the newest version of them were supposed to be released next week. That is not going to happen due to the shutdown. Those data points are going to come a little bit later. But at some point, we'll recalibrate with new data as we receive it. So let's start with the inputs. Some of the things we need to calculate. We need to know what the student capacity increase is. We need to know what the total new capital investments in schools are going to be. We need to know the amount that's going to be associated with growth. We need the amount of new housing units projected. We also need to know what type of units are being projected, and the number of students by each type of housing unit, because we're really trying to tie the impact of the housing unit on the schools. So let's start first with how we get to the amount of money that we think is reasonable to assign to future growth. And this is the simplest calculation. I simply took, here's what the new schools are going to say that their capacity will be once completed. Here's what the existing enrollment is, subtract those two out, and we get really 516, thank you, increase in students, and we can do that as a calculation. It's 20.7% of the school capacity increase that's going to be new, that's beyond the existing needs. So we can reasonably assign that to growth. So that's 20.7%. So that's where that comes from. The next piece.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, again, I think this is, it's very reasonable, but it is high because the thing it doesn't consider is in-migration, which, as we know, given our suburban sprawling community, a lot of new students tend to come from turnover of those households. And so I think this is still appropriate, but it does, like, I wouldn't be surprised if, especially the development community, came back and said something, because again, it's hard to really attach where the kids are coming from, whether it's new development or
It is,
existing development.
right.
Because I think of like my neighborhood where there's 100 single family homes that keep that are turning over more than I thought. And every time it turns over, a new young family with many
Right.
children coming in.
Right. And there's no way to assign any costs to that turnover. Hopefully there's a good portion of it is replacement. Students have come and gone, and these are replacement, but there's no question that there's some of the new capacity that will be taken up just by the churn of new housing units.
So not only is there a challenge to assign those, there's also challenges to how and when to collect it.
Yeah.
With new growth, we do it, tie it as part of the permit. So we have them as a captive audience. It must be paid as part of
Right.
doing the business. Simply selling a house, we're not aware of it until
Yeah.
60 days after it happens, because we get a deed from the registry. So I think that's the other challenge.
And I don't think we could even if we could, I don't think there's a way to assign costs to them. So next we need to go to the next slide. We needed to figure out, hey, how much are we going to, what's the basis by which we're going to make this calculation? And so we're doing two things. We're doing the new investment for the schools plus financing, and that's 221 million. And then we had 30 million left over that were reasonably assigned to capital expenses that were already on the books. And because we had an existing impact fee that was going to pay that, it felt reasonable that we could roll that back in to these new fees. We're just basically taking longer to pay that $30 million back.
Majority of that is the one where schools still.
Right, right. And again, because we already had if we didn't have an existing impact fee at the time, going into this, it might be harder to apply that 30 million, but since we had one and we're already trying to pay it off, let's just roll that back in. So our basis, our beginning number is 251 million. And so we're just applying the 20.7% to that. And so the amount that we want to raise through impact fees is $52 million. Is that everybody with that? Okay. And then now we got to the challenging parts. So the Finance Committee looked at a couple of different scenarios, but they settled on the 30-year payment, repayment. And so over 30 years, if we use the 260 units a year from the rate of growth ordinance, we're talking about 7,800 new units over time. And that's what we're going to use to determine how we get paid back $52 million. We're going to focus on those $78 million, or 7,800 students.
This is where the impacts of something like LD 1829, if the units end up being much higher than that, which potentially is the case, it will change some of the unit pricing. We still need to solve for the same 52 million. It's just a matter of how many units and how many people are paying us.
Right. Exactly. And so one of the things that the existing impact fee does is it looks at a relationship between single family and other types of unit structures and says, well, the single family is the basis by which we're going to determine the fee. And then the 2 to 4 units and multifamily and other types of smaller units really have less of an impact on the school system. And so the existing system does discount those numbers. And so we went back and said, well, let's look at what the current information says from the American Community Survey, and let's assign them to the different types of units so that we're making sure we're assigning the correct impact per unit. And just, we did do a special run of the census data, and we allocated the number of children to each of the different types of units. And it is for a slightly larger area. It's not just for Scarborough. And that's because you can't do a special run. You can't do the public use microdata at the community level, but is the suburban Portland area. And so when we looked at it 2 ways. We looked at children per unit under 18, and then we looked at children per units 5 to 17, which is the school age. There wasn't that much difference. So we just basically rounded out and said, if we're going to say single family is the 100%, we're going to roughly say that the townhouses and the 2 to 4 units are roughly 50% of that. If you're in a structure with 5 to 9 units, you're looking at 35%. And then 10 units plus, it's really about 10% of what the single family does. And those are all pulled from the census, the American Community Survey data, allocating students to different types of units. And so that's really what we're saying is, let's look at the 100% for the single family, 50% of the single family costs, and then so on and so forth.
It shouldn't surprise you. The key determinant is number of bedrooms in this regard. And very pleased that we're able to kind of validate what seemed intuitive through this data in terms of, sure enough, units of these sorts of units based on the census results produce lesser students. And so we have had to round a bit just for simplicity, frankly, but we think it tracks pretty closely.
So Tom, when you say that, when you look at, is that actually extrapolating numbers from developments or structures in Scarborough? Because if you take a look at like the Beacon, for example, or the Downs or places, did we have any sense going in what potential impact to schools might be, and then taking a look like 3 to 5 years out and what what the impact actually is.
So we use the American Community Survey, which is, for us, it's nice to have a consistent data set over time so that we can keep going back to it. We didn't look at individual apartments or things like that, but we do know from some of our work with the Downs. In fact, we just got the newest numbers from the school department, really suggesting that it is true that those buildings that have multiple units really do have fewer children in them. And that only makes sense because, in fact, I'm going to say we looked at the assessor and I just pulled all of the apartments in Scarborough, and we took an average size of those units, which was 1.5 bedrooms. So they really are smaller. It's not zero. It's definitely there's an impact, but that's what we're using the ACS for.
Yeah, I remember during the school enrollment study, there was a lot of good work done with benchmarks to different
Mhm.
apartments and buildings in Scarborough. I don't think the Downs was quite at development that they didn't have them as a benchmark, but these numbers feel consistent. What really is the driver for students and apartments is those 3 bedrooms, because I remember them sharing that a 3-bedroom apartment unit is equivalent at producing the same number of students as a 3-bedroom house.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And so we talked about that a little bit at finance, and what gave me a little bit of comfort was, in reality, there aren't apartments that have all 3 bedrooms.
Mhm.
They're usually a mix of 1, 2, 3. And so that's where these numbers, I think, I got a little bit more comfortable knowing that it's really a average of the actual number of units.
It is. And in our calculations, in these calculations, we are including the 1-bedroom and units. Probably not a lot of kids there, but we're adding those in. And I think when the school does theirs, they zero out the 1-bedroom. So, it's just using different data sources, and I always fall down on the, am I going to be able to get this tomorrow, in the next year, in the next year? And so we can begin to track it.
So though we have not used that methodology, I think we can use it kind of case by case to test these numbers. We've done that really out of curiosity. Beacon is a good example. There was some representation made at the front end of that project with the contract zone approvals, what to be expected in terms of impacts. And we did do a look back. It escapes me. I can certainly provide that to you. With the Downs project, it's a little more complicated because there's nearly 600 units of all different types. And we need to rely on our colleagues at the school because we don't know where the kids are, they do. And that's, it needs to be confidential information, of course. But if we give them a physical address and say, are there any kids at this address, they can tell us that, obviously.
Yeah. And so, so we're working through the current data. We just received data from the school department last week before last.
Yep.
And it looks pretty consistent from the previous years. But it's all of these pieces, you got to keep track of them, and you've got to keep looking at how things change, because we are on the cusp of having some demographic changes, and we have added a lot of multifamily units, and so things are changing, and we're trying to keep track of that and understand what it means to the demand on different types of resources. So this is the next sheet. This is a comparison between what is existing in terms of how the calculations were done and then the proposed. So in the existing impact fee, everything's calculated off the single family. That's why you're seeing that as 100%. So the existing fee has 2-family at 38%. What we found is that's probably a little bit low. And so we essentially bumped that up to 50%. The current system aggregates multifamily from 3+ units on, and we've broken it out so it's a little fairer, and we can be more specific about what that demand is.
Right, there's simply a multiplex category which captures all of it. We're trying to provide little structure below that.
Differentiation. And so the other thing that I was a little bit low, I think, was the 5 to 9 units surprised me but it came out a little bit higher than the 25% that we have in existing. So that's why things are changing just a little bit.
Notably, the one thing that's not here that is included in the existing one is a specific fee for affordable housing unit. And that's a point we want to circle back to and get your feedback on.
Right, right. Okay, so then the next job that we have to do is say, of those 7,800 units, what do you think the distribution is between these different types of units? And I'm going to say that's a challenging thing to project over 30 years. We looked at the last 10 years of the distribution between single family and multifamily. And so we started with that and said over the last 10 years, it's been about 37% have been single family. So we locked that in at 40% in terms of a projection. And again, there's nothing hard and fast. We could play with these numbers a little bit. This seemed to be a reasonable distribution. The single family attached, think the townhouses that are going on, but also think about some of the duplexes that are new in the Chamberlain development. So there's a lot of different types of things going on. And so that's our distribution. I'm willing to entertain if somebody wants to, play with those numbers. What I would say is, this is the mathematics of it. The more single family that you have, the lower the impact fee is. Because if you have a small number of single family, we have to jump up all of the numbers in order to get us to the $52 million. And that's why this next piece, we're looking at what we expect, how we got to the 52 million. And
Again,
again,
this would be affected, pending impact of LE 1829 or other factors
Sure.
as well. But
said, starting somewhere, you just gotta start. So the goal is to raise 52 million. If I take the 7,800 units and divide that into the 52 million, my first number is the base fee, which is 6,670. That's a straight calculation of 52 million divided by 7,800. And then when you look at this table, it shows the base fee. And so if you look at single family attached, 2 to 4 units, 5 to 9, that's simply taking that 6,670 and multiplying it by the projected fee ratios. And what you see is, I don't get $52 million. So the only way to do that is to jack up the price for the single family and then let the other units cascade. And so when you do that, you get 11,400 basically for single family detached, 5,700 for the single family attached and the 2 to 4 units, and so forth and so on. And when you do that, and then you multiply it by the expected units, we get to $52 million. And so what the Finance Committee discussed is it's important to be tracking this, because if we're wrong on this distribution, our numbers can be wrong. So we're going to have to autocorrect, every couple of years is what I think. And, it's much like the rate of growth ordinance. We have to go back and recalibrate that every 3 years, as long as we have it. And so I think it's reasonable to say, this is where we are today. Things are going to change. We're going to track this. We're going to understand more each year about what development is going to do. And we can build into the final ordinance how we do that. As opposed to the way we do it now, which is we've just taken the base fee that we came up with in 2002, I think, and just used inflation. Well, that doesn't get us, that doesn't get us up to the amount of fees that we need. So anyway, that's how we got to the numbers that are in the memo. And then the council consideration, it's obvious that the single family fees, they're gonna more than double. That's scary. But that's where this methodology leads us. The one thing I would say is, I think I put it in the memo, if you look at that as a percentage of the current price, a sales price of a house, it winds up being 1.2 to 1.5%. It's, you don't want to do this lightly, but if we need to raise 52 million, we've got to make some decisions. And as Tom alluded to, we do need to make sure that we're figuring out what you want to do with affordable housing. I think the existing ordinance says, hey, we're just going to do, I think it was 50% reduction. What I would say is, I would recommend do the 50% reduction based on what type of unit is being proposed. If it's single family, do the 50% of that fee, if that's what you want to do. If it's apartments, use that and do the 50% discount. So that's what we need to do. And then the senior housing, at this point, we have not assigned a fee to senior housing. And then we do have to think, is senior housing going to be on top of that 7,800 forecast that we have? The rate of growth ordinance does allow for some additional affordable housing fees. So I think it's reasonable to put that on top and not let that mess up the calculation. And then obviously knowing what's going to happen with 1829 and looking at where the new data puts us in the future, and then ensuring that we've vetted this in terms of the community and letting people know what's going on with this. And I guess I would turn it back to you guys for discussion now.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and we'll go on to council comments, further comments or questions. And I will note, not to put her on the spot, but we do have a school board chair in the audience this evening, in case there are any questions sort of from the school side.
Just for your benefit, this table just shows a head-to-head comparison of what the current fees are and what the new fees would be under this proposed approach.
Couple questions. Thank you. It's very helpful. Do we have any sense of how many affordable housing units in town currently have school-age children in them? Like, do we have an analysis of that? And my other question would be, I don't know if this is the correct
terminology, but what is the gross margin for an affordable housing developer, like on selling a 3-unit, either house or apartment or townhouse, versus a gross margin on just a regular developer building and selling a unit?
I might turn to Corey for part of that.
Yeah, but the question about selling an affordable unit,
Yeah.
it's a tough one because it's not a very big data set, because most affordable housing tends to be
Rentals.
And there are some examples like, Habitat for Humanity and some other deed
Yeah.
restricted ownership units that have been developed. And I don't know offhand, that's not really my bailiwick, but it's a good question. I mean, I will say, as I've talked about in the past, that the margins in general are pretty small in affordable housing generally. And I, to give my own opinion on one of the council discussion topics, I think it does make sense to tie those fees to the bedroom count, so it's sort of commensurate with how it's approached across the board.
The one thing I would relate, the town, actually in the Downs, 13 of the units, I believe it's 13 of the units are homeownership units. There's other more traditional rental, particularly for senior in there as well, but 13 are subject to an agreement or a covenant that the town actually imposed on the property. It runs with the deed. what I can tell you, and I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but for folks, we're still dealing with, I think 3 of them is sold from the original sale. They're all a bit different, but generally speaking, it is not advantageous at all because of the restrictions that we place on the property, really because of the interest rate environment. They bought in the 3% interest rate and they're now 6 and above. That alone reduces the buying power of the next qualified buyer so much so that it's not for the folks that want to sell or interested in exploring that. In some cases, they have to sell it for a lower price than they bought it for 5 years ago. So point being, these sorts of restrictions are affected by a lot of different factors, but all of which have a way of really insulating them from typical market conditions. We're really kind of putting our thumb on the deal to make sure that the buyer is qualified and can afford to live there.
And the first part of that question is, we did not look at affordable housing units in isolation of whether or not they generate a different amount of children per unit. We haven't looked at that.
We could
I understand.
certainly do that.
But the majority though of our affordable housing units are
Senior.
1-bedroom senior affordable. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of family affordable housing choices. And so my assumption would be, just like for 1-bedroom apartments, it's gonna be close to that, which is pretty, slim in terms of actual students. I'm sure there are maybe some students in these senior affordable projects, but again, that's probably more an anomaly than a.
Yeah, the 2 projects we look at would be Avesta Southgate in Dunston. That is a family focused. And then I believe the Oaks Apartments down here on Gore Road. So those have physical addresses. We could work with school and find that out. You can also just look at the bus stop and get a pretty good sense.
The Oaks was one that I remember in the school building or the school enrollment study. That was one that they had in there, and
Mhm.
I recall it being smaller than the market rate housing.
And the assessor and I have looked at, and we've pulled all of the commercial apartments out of the commercial database, and we're working on that to do a couple of things. One, add what's being charged for rents, we know that, and also the number of bedrooms. And so we are working on some detailed work around the commercial housing. And we can certainly look at which of those are affordable units.
Yeah, and I will just add, as long as I'm sort of wearing the affordable housing guy hat. A couple of years ago when my organization was looking to get approvals for the Planned 3I project in the Downs, which is for a fully affordable project intended for people with physical disabilities. That was a discussion topic, absolutely. And I do remember that being, and it's pretty common that it's some of the projects are so idiosyncratic, and that one's kind of an extreme example because it's kind of a subset of a population. And it was really difficult to find comps, if you will, for what that type of project what type of school impact that project would have. But I'm glad that staff has access to information, directly from some of the properties and developers and through the schools. And as you mentioned, Tom, you can sort of work backwards based on addresses.
Yeah, because you're dealing with rentals, I think you do need to take a very consistent look at it because those units by their nature do turn over. And so what we see in 1 year doesn't necessarily predict the future.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah. So thank you, Karen, for all this work and everything you've done for finance committee too. I think the big thing for me is it's really hard to predict the future. And I think you've done the best you can looking at historical data to come up with really good assumptions that we can live with. I can live with these. I totally think it would be nice as we develop this into the ordinance language to make sure we do have a provision in there specifically that forces reviews during annual, every 2 years, every 3 years. I don't really have an opinion on how often, But knowing LD 1829 is coming and we just don't know what we don't know, it would be good to have like a forced mechanism. Again, the council could always do it before then, but at least a forced mechanism to check in and make sure that this particular impact fee, especially given the dollar value, is correct. I'm supportive in the same vein, like doing the same thing for affordable housing that we're doing today, which is 50% based on the unit type. Again, knowing that that can be revisited in the future. Again, I don't predict, unfortunately, at least the way LD 1829 is currently written, that we're gonna see a huge swing of affordable projects. I think it's gonna likely be market rate. And I think giving a little bit of relief to like true affordable projects doesn't change the fact that we still have to collect the 52 million. It just means we're likely subsidizing it more from the market rate housing, which I think to Michelle's point are probably making more margins anyways, that can probably afford to do that, even though all these costs ultimately go on to the homeowner in some form or fashion. So for affordable, I think I'm comfortable giving some percentage reduction. 50% feels fine to me.
Thank you. Karen?
But I guess I'm trying to follow, because is affordable, how, are we buying it or are we renting it? Because are we actually carrying on this impact fee to the renters? Because I mean, if it's affordable, has to be within a certain price range to make it affordable, right? And so they can only impact it so much. So I guess if it's all rentals, we're basically saying, can we charge the developer the full impact fee? Which I'm okay with, but if it's actually carrying it over to the cost, I don't want that. But is it going to be carried if it's a, set rate for that? And I think the question I had was that the calculations that you presented tonight, was that based on the current 50% discounted rate?
No, I didn't, I did not include affordable housing in this because I used the 260 bases of the units. And affordable housing could be additional units, even with the current,
Or some
Ordinance.
percentage of this is 7,800 that she's projecting,
Right,
so
right.
we've got to do a little additional engineering there, but your point's well
Right.
taken. Those fees would be paid upfront one time by the developer. They would be factored into the pro forma, and whether that kind of tips the scales and makes it unaffordable, but the rents themselves would be purposely held, kept low. And that's a requirement of the federal,
Well, and I didn't know if because we
Local
were giving that
statutes.
discounted rate, we're then bumping up the impact fee for everyone else and they're subsidizing the affordable housing. And I think I wanted to understand that.
Well, I do think it's a good point, though, if we can distinguish renter versus owned in these, that makes sense to me to say if it's a rental for affordable, because it is on the developer. Again, I just don't understand the mechanics of affordable development enough to know, like, to your point, does that make something not attractive? And then we're not getting affordable projects.
I would just,
For rental either.
I would just quickly offer that typically a one-time upfront fee like that, same as with, sewer connection fees and things like that, is a lot easier for an affordable or any developer to absorb, but including an affordable housing developer to absorb than a recurring operational cost. So like real estate taxes and insurance and utilities are three examples of really volatile costs that seem to just always be increasing, that really eat into the ability to support financing. But to have, that's not to say that it doesn't have an impact and that wouldn't be a factor, but I think it's a lot easier to sort of just capitalize it as an upfront cost. And then you're not burdening the residents with it, because we all know that ultimately we get passed on to them.
Well, I think that's.
And my point is like, I don't want to be like, oh, we're giving a discount to affordable housing and guess what, everyone, the rest of you are paying that 15%, and that's not obviously what we want.
Larry?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Right, as soon as you said that, Karen, I think that was right on. That the other point to what you're saying, Corey, too, is that one-time fee would go into the overhead cost of building that project, but they're going to have a rental stream for 50 years that
Right.
will cover that. So my only other point with it is we also have other mechanisms to help make affordable housing more financially sound, or available to people developing in town, whether it's Housing Alliance grants or CEAs or whatever it may be. So it sounds harsh to say, I don't know that we need to discount affordable housing for these impact fees. But, and maybe it's something we revisit. But I kind of am against discounting it because, and to John's point, I am talking about rental projects, I guess. I'm open to the idea that home ownership, it would increase that cost, but and so maybe that does deserve that impact discount. And Karen, I think this is really solid modeling. I really, for the amount of variables that you had to deal with, I think that it's also, to me, very easy moving forward to adjust these when we solve some of those variables. So I'm really supportive of the whole idea. But that was kind of my one concern. Sorry, John, I would say, maybe because of all the variables coming with 1829, if we're going to write it into ordinance, I don't know if it's reasonable. I would like to see these enacted pretty quickly to capture whatever's coming in the pipeline. I would say maybe we should review it for July rather than 1 or 2 years when we know more about 1829, just structurally as we write that ordinance. And then maybe it's every year or two after that. But thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah,
John?
I was just gonna say, I changed my mind. For simplicity, I agree, like maybe just keep it, equal for every project, whether it's rental or not, knowing again, we'll learn, to your point, Larry, we can make changes later. Trying to keep it simple, I think, is probably super important, and not going down this path of maybe this for affordable, ownership versus rentals. Like, let's just keep it simple, and just try and go with this recommendation just to kind of get the ball rolling, knowing that there's some variables that you will either learn from or will change in the future. And if I like your idea too of like the first year, probably do it within the first year because there's enough change coming, and then the cadence after that to make it make more sense. I do have a question about after this, like what is the next step in terms of moving this forward? Since it's been to finance, I don't think it needs to go back there, but does it then go to ordinance, and ordinance works through the actual ordinance language? Like what do you guys see as the process to move this forward?
We certainly could go to ordinance, but it seems to me that purpose may have been served by this. And so I don't believe that the actual drafting of the ordinance amendment is all that complicated.
It's an amendment to the existing.
Right. These are these tables are the building block of all that. So I would think we could kind of fast track this and bring an ordinance in first reading fairly quickly without objection from the council.
Leah, maybe you could put that list of questions for the council back up. I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. I know there was also the question about senior housing and whether we wanted to maintain that exemption, if you will. I don't know if anyone has comments on that or anything else.
From my mind, I was gonna ask about senior. It said there wouldn't be impact on schools, so then they would not be included in this. But if you take a look at just for the cost to the town of just infrastructure impacts, if you put the school aside, if you look at, fire and police and bridges, roads and all that, then what's the impact? There's an impact to our finances. And so where does an impact fee or a, influx of financial support come in for that?
It would have to be separate from the housing. This is specifically for schools. And, so at this point, we don't have any type of impact fee dealing with public services. But remember, impact fees have to be related to the physical structure.
But if we, sorry.
Okay.
But if we say we approved 100, like Magnolia Place, which is 55 and older, or Juneberry, so we approved a new one and it's gonna have 100 single family units for 55 and older. I mean, that still has a huge impact on all the infrastructure. So
Yeah, it's just the way the state regulation is, it's like you have to do the impact fee. This is specifically for schools. You'd have to do something
Yeah,
different.
the statute enables us to impose impact fees in the first place. It further defines what you can charge impact fees for, and I will provide that statute for your benefit. I believe police and fire, public services is one. We've not chosen to go down that road, but we do have kind of a suite of other impact fees, traffic impact fees, recreational impact fees. Potentially, we'll talk about an open space fee. So presumably those impacts are captured through those other impact fees, not this one.
Why haven't we explored the public safety one? Only because I know when I've talked to the chiefs a little bit about what's impacting them the most, specifically for fire. It usually, like what was shared with me was, it wasn't necessarily homes, it was the nursing homes and things that are pretty popular in Scarborough, and yeah, and so those tend to raise their costs more than the development. So I don't know if that's
Yeah, unfortunately, it's that staffing. And so we can't use impact fees to cover staffing. If we needed, another new fire station, which,
Like, can you do for like ambulances or like a fire truck and that type of thing? Because we certainly have an impact there.
I have to, it's whether or not a ambulance would be considered capital under the state law. So that's something that we can definitely take a look at.
it would be interesting to know for communities that do have a public safety impact fee, if there are any, like if they are considering that type.
I suspect there's very few, if any, that have that fee in particular. I would say with EMS, I don't know the answer to your question as to why we don't. I would say EMS is different in that it has its own revenue stream associated. So if we have a billable run, we actually do get paid for that. So to the extent that there's more demand, we do recoup some of those costs.
It's hard to, like, I think you're right. It's like, it's infrastructure,
Right.
not, like, I don't think it's all capital. I think
Right.
it's infrastructure. So
It's in mortar, think of it that way, or physical.
And so just to circle back to the senior housing question, presumably if we were going to levy an impact fee there, it would need to be based on some presumption, some data or presumption of some presumably small number of students coming out of, 55 and older households. I don't know if that data exists. Or- Right. I mean, I know we commonly do hear people pointing, questions that there's frequently or commonly discussions around parking
Yeah.
needs. And we're reminded periodically that people over 55 are still pretty active and sometimes they have kids in school. Sometimes they have kids in the schools. I'm almost there.
Or it could be a grandparent with.
Right.
Yeah.
So
But I think that's.
I don't know if the
They do.
juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. But
Yeah.
presumably there would need to be that nexus there, right?
Right.
John, did you have anything else? No? Anyone else? All right. Well, I do want to allow a few minutes for us to kind of turn over and have a brief break before we start our 7 o'clock business meeting. If there's anyone among the public who would like to comment on this, you can certainly do so during general public comment at the beginning of the council meeting. But for now, we will adjourn and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Scarborough Town Council. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We please have the roll call?
Counselor Doherty,
Here.
Counselor Kane,
Here.
Counselor Shu,
Here.
Counselor Anderson,
Here.
Counselor Donovan,
Here.
Counselor Hayes,
Here.
and Chairman Fellows.
Here.
Thank you, all present.
All present, thank you. The next item on our agenda is general public comments. This is for items that are not on our agenda. So if you have a comment on something that is not an agenda item for tonight, please approach the podium. I ask that you please state your name, give your address, and that you respect everyone's time by limiting your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mike Doyle. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I own and write for FalmouthToday.me. It had 10 million hits in 3 years and 54,000 new readers on a distribution list of 16 names. I'm talking tonight about my experience with Tom Hall and answering freedom of access requests. Had him in court a few years ago, and Mark Franco was the attorney from, I think it was Drummond Woodsum. And he brought in Mark and had Tom as a witness, Tody, and the IT lady. Because I was the plaintiff, I got a chance to go first, so I called the IT lady, did my direct examination on her. Mark Franco did the cross-examination. And in that process, I learned stuff I didn't know, so I got up and did redirect. Got more information. Same thing happened with Tody. When I got through doing my direct on Tom Hall, found out that someplace between 100 and 1,000 emails have been withheld from my freedom of access request. We finally narrowed it down to someplace around 1,300, I guess it was. So I asked the judge, Joyce Wheeler, for an in-camera review of them to see which ones qualify to be withheld and which ones don't. Well, the ones that I knew that was in that, I had already seen them at Franco's office. He had 4 binders, 4 inches thick, hundreds of emails. And the one I liked the most was from Kathy Chandler to the chief of police saying so-and-so came by the office to thank him for intervening with District Attorney Anderson about his case. Apparently, the fix was in and some charge was dropped. But she documented it in an email. Well, come to find out, I asked for all these to be reviewed, and there was about a dozen that the judge thought should be disclosed to me. I had already seen this dozen, so they didn't actually show me the ones that they withheld. They just showed me ones that they didn't know I had seen. And it was a pretty dishonest thing to do, and Tom Hall was part of that. I had the hardest time getting information from Tom Hall. I find that the worse the information is, the greater the resistance is in giving it to me. I can ask Bill Shane back before he retired a question on Sunday night at 6:30, thinking I'll get the answer sometime the following week. I get the answer at 9 o'clock that night. Here, you have to jump through several hoops to get to the answer. And Tom Hall makes it very difficult to get the information that I want because it's unflattering or it indicates some other wrongdoing that I uncover in these freedom of access requests. And I think Tom Hall needs to know that I've kept track of all this stuff. And Mark Franco probably is one of the worst lawyers I ever had to go up against. My time is up, but I'll tell a story about Mark Franco in another day. The town lawyer that you guys use for cases. Unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me get my water and I'll get out of the way. Thank you.
Hello, Nina McKee, 309 Black Point Road. Oops. First of all, Tom Hall answers all of my questions. Thank you, Tom. And second of all, I hated to come in tonight because the lights outside are so incredible. I mean, it is so beautiful, and I marvel at how the people put up all those lights when I can only do 2 strings. So, thank you for that. As far as the impact fees, I mean, of course, we're all concerned about growth. And 7,800 units coming up, that's a lot of units. And I think that developers need to have high fees throughout the whole board, really high fees. And I think that the opportunity for a developer to not pay the fee, to not pay the fee, or not to, what is it, when the developer can put the money into a fund or something? Is that, I don't quite know that, but they have this a loophole that a developer, doesn't have to pay the fee or something. And that should change. And I think the developer, they must be so happy now with 1829 coming around. And I think that we need to, as a town, we need to stand up and gather all the other towns and try to have a lawsuit, because our ordinance is a law. It's a law in our, and so our home rule is just being smashed. But also, I think the developers need to have much more percentage of low-income housing, much more than 10%. I think that should be huge, huge. So I hope I'm being clear. I'm not too clear, but I'm trying. So, but it's important, and we've got to keep an eye on growth. We've got to, and I think impact fees could really maybe reduce some of the growth. So thank you very much.
That was very clear. Thank you.
Richard Hayes, Martin Avenue. I hear a lot of talk about 1829, and I don't know very much about it. It seems like no one in the state knows all of the answers. Mr. Hall made reference that he found somebody that's in favor of it and likes it, and he's the guy who wrote it, Mr. Fecto. I've heard several of you people talk against it. While I don't agree with the litigious world that we're in, our state seems to be very fond of filing lawsuits against the federal government. I think we ought to do something along that lines with the state. Scarborough isn't alone. I heard the mayor of Portland make a statement that 1829 is a disaster. It is going to have an immense dealing with infrastructure. And it isn't going to go away. I mean, Route 1, Broad Turn Road, which I live off of, is an interesting place to come down and maneuver. I mean, coming here tonight, I was probably 8 or 10 cars in line before me, and this was at 5:45. So let's not just talk about it. Let's get some real pushback to the state. This is a big issue. Let's not just talk about it and say, hey, it's coming, it's coming. Let's gather the troops and put up a wall or whatever and force the state's hand. And as I say, if we have to file a lawsuit, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for general public comment? I don't see anybody online. All right. Thank you very much for those comments. Next item is the minutes from the November 19th, 2025 regular town council meeting. We have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda, there are none. Items to be signed, treasurer's warrants, I signed those and delivered those to town clerk earlier. Item number 8 is the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just speak to one of the comments made at the podium just a moment ago. You know, the role of the state as regards freedom of access to public records is very, very clear. We're well versed in that, the law. We respect it. We follow it. I believe I'm looking at Mrs. Hamilton in the audience. She recently filed a FOIA request. From our perspective, I think we're timely and thorough in that response. So the suggestion otherwise is simply categorically false. It's law. We must follow it. We do. So back to my report. With respect to Scotty Hill Road, it's a bit of a broken record, but it's an important matter, and I'm going to continue talking about it. We have continued our outreach, met with the Flaherty family, and appreciated some of their input in the matter. Not terribly conclusive, but nonetheless, they're very important to be certainly involved in this conversation. We have received initial word from a review committee that the grant that we applied for seems to be favorably considered. We won't know that until early in January. We're using the time between now and then to really study some of the traffic impacts and what would this actually mean if we were to consider closing. That's a very important consideration. And in any event, I have promised council leadership that we'll have a workshop and there'll be a decision point that this council will have before it by the end of January. So allow us a few more weeks to assemble the related information so you can have kind of the menu of options in front of you and understand the different choices. But we do expect to have this resolved and bring it to you for your decision in the next couple of weeks.
Highlight public outreach. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, we haven't done it other than kind of direct outreach to individuals. Frankly, in my experience doing this for over 30 years, I think the best outreach can happen once we have something tangible to talk about and people can see and react to. And I think we're still in that information gathering mode. So I would expect there needs to be public outreach once we have the information to share. Right now, and I'm not opposed to collecting opinions, but I think they're just that. Let's understand, you know, the facts of the matter and the consequences. And at that point, you can have really meaningful public input. So I'm committed to that. We will. Speaking of that, the Peterson Field Lighting Project, we have convened a neighborhood meeting. It's next week, Thursday, December 11th, be held at the Public Safety Building at 6 p.m. Notices were sent out to abutters within 500 feet, not abutters, but people who are living within 500 feet of the field. Not surprisingly, it's garnered some interest, which is exactly what our purpose was. I'm always interested to hear if you're hearing things from residents and neighbors. But at that meeting, we're certainly going to share some of the plans that we have, receive input. I think the biggest question that I've heard is kind of hours of operation, very understandable. That's the thing that will impact the neighborhood the most. And representatives from Little League will be at that meeting, so I expect we'll learn a lot. This project does require planning board review or advisory opinion, so that work is being assembled. So there'll be a public process associated with that as well. In terms of property tax relief, we've been working quite actively with our partners through GPCOG. We also have the luxury of having our tax assessors serve on the statewide task force. This is a very busy month. That task force is due to provide an interim report by the first of the year, and I think they're on track to do that. I've seen some of their work. It is wide and varied. It's looking at national examples of how other states, fund state and local programs and what sort of tax structures. I'm very hopeful that something meaningful will come out of this, but we'll see. There's been any number of blue ribbon commissions through the years that have produced well-intended but produced nothing. So I'm a bit cynical anymore, but pleased that the conversation is happening again. Karen Martin, who is with you this evening, is a self-professed kind of data wonk, if you will. And so I'm capitalizing on her talents to help me assemble some, I think, helpful information around sales tax and income tax and that's all part of the equation. Hopefully more will come early in the new year, and hopefully meaningful change is part of that.
Tom,
Yes,
sorry, I'm assuming, I don't know much of the background on that, but I'm assuming that the idea is to try to shift some of the burden away from property tax to
Yes.
other revenue sources?
yes.
Okay.
And in doing so, provide property tax relief. That's going to be the challenge. It's not just adding additional tax, it's finding other ways to fund local and state programs, but provide property tax relief at the same time. That will be the trick. Very thankful for your willingness to hold a workshop with senior staff. We have that scheduled for next Monday, December 8th at 5:30. We do expect to have a light dinner. We'll have pizza and salad and some drink. And staff is actively filling out a questionnaire that we've provided them. We'll provide that information to you in advance, so you have that as a benefit before that meeting, and we do look forward to that. The bond order is on this evening. I don't know that I'll speak too much to that, other than the fact that I appreciate what I expect will be a newly constituted Finance Committee meeting later, Finance Committee later this evening has agreed to a meeting next Monday at 4 for purposes of talking a little more in depth on the bond issue, particularly as it relates to the school project. This will be the first borrowing for the new school. We'd like to set this up correctly. We look for the input from Finance Committee. Our annual Sparkle in the Park, it used to be just Santa in the Park, but we've rebranded it slightly. Sparkle in the Park is this coming Saturday, December 6th, 5 to 7 at Memorial Park. All the traditional events, and it looks like we'll have snow for the event, which always kind of adds to the mystique, I think. For counselors, the elected officials dinner that was scheduled for the 15th of December has been postponed. They're searching for another date, and I'll make you aware of that. And lastly, Liam just mentioned that our community survey results will be available next week, end of next week. We'll have to sort through how we disseminate that, but certainly will be provided to you. We do have on the books a workshop with the council and our consultant for January 7th, but we fully intend to have those results available to the public and to you in advance of that. And lastly, with respect to LD 1829, we've been very active in that regard as well. I'm working with our colleagues at GP Cog. The initial conversation is around a proclamation or a resolution of sorts that ideally other communities could consider and adopt. And we think there's value in kind of numbers and solidarity. I'm thinking back to the Gorham Connector effort that we led. What often happens is to come up with a document that is palatable, not just to 7 of you, but then multiply that out by multiple other towns, that document ends up getting watered down. And so I'm interested in pursuing this for a short period. If that seems to be getting bogged down, I think it's something that this council could consider on its own, and others could consider a similar measure if they wish. But as was said from the podium, I think now's the time to act. Particularly since it appears as though there is some fix-up legislation in this next session. And so these conversations are alive and active in Augusta, and to the extent that we can influence those, we really should. So I'll continue to be focused on that. Yeah, so that's my report for this evening.
Thanks, Tom. Other council comments or questions?
Yeah, more just a comment for leadership, maybe to discuss at your next meeting. I think it would be great to invite our delegation to come for 2 purposes. One, to talk about 1829, and the second, to look at this property tax relief information as it becomes available. I think it would be great to get our legislatures to understand what our positions are, and hopefully carry that forward through the legislative process. I hear what Tom is saying of a lot of times there's these good ideas and they don't go anywhere, and it really requires a sponsor. So if there's something that we as a council feel strongly we'd like our legislatures to pursue, it would be great to kind of have them here, talk through it, and hopefully have them leave here taking some ownership, not only on the property tax relief, but also any fixes we want for 1829. I have already reached out to Stacy Brenner, who's expressed an openness to have discussion. I think it would probably be better for the entire delegation to be here with us, but I'm happy to work with her to try and make something like that happen. But I think it's really important that we have a conversation on both of these topics, because they're both super important to our community, both affordability and growth. And so we need them to kind of step up a little bit and help us with some laws.
As
Yeah,
an aside,
definitely support that.
I won't speak for our local delegation. What I've heard from my colleagues who've approached their delegations is that many of them were surprised, didn't know anything about it, which is shocking. And I think the reason for that is because this bill was voted out unanimously from committee, it was put on a consent agenda and it was kind of passed under the gavel, they call it. So it didn't ever come to the floor for a vote, which is just equally shocking given the magnitude of this bill. Did not see the day of the light of day, if you will, on the full floor. Another reason to perhaps revisit this. So just shocking to hear that being the response from folks that they are not even aware what it is.
Michelle?
Yeah, a couple of things. I talked to Sophie Warren, about this probably 3 weeks ago. I think it was a couple of days before my first meeting. And, she had a lot of information and wanted to meet, and I said, not yet. So she knows that we're on it, and she's just basically waiting to hear back from us. And I think having the three of them involved is critical, and that hopefully we get alignment from that group so that they're representing our voice in Augusta and they're not sort of, on different, places on the continuum. So Sophie knows that's coming when we're ready to have that conversation. A couple other things, Tom, I don't know if, with this bill, how involved is MMA on something like that? And, are they speaking, did they know where their sort of, partners were, and did they really pick a fight, or were they sort of surprised too?
No, MMA was fully aware, fully engaged. They have a so-called legislative policy committee.
Okay.
That's made up of a subset of their members. Do keep in mind, MMA represents the interests of nearly 500 municipalities. And so what is of interest or concern to us is far different than
Right.
northern, western, and eastern Maine.
Right.
And so they find themselves kind of in that predicament. And they follow the will of this LPC. I will say the line that they held and they pushed very hard on is kind of home rule, which is kind of cuts through and across the entire state. And that's kind of the rallying cry that they took. I don't recall that they got into kind of all the particulars.
Okay.
And it was a very fast moving, confusing session to begin with.
Yeah.
So, they weren't asleep. And they were opposed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Scott?
Yeah, basically, there's only one way out. I mean, your property tax relief, either it's gonna be, federally subsidized or state subsidized, but that's our money, it's still coming from us. Either way you do it, it's the only way to really cut property taxes is to stop spending. You have to somehow decrease the budget. We can't be spending lavishly on buildings and stuff like we are. We gotta just stop. We've got beautiful structures in town. I think we have more than enough. We're talking about a community center, and that's been brought up for the past 20 or 30 years, and every time it gets voted down. And, at first it was a senior community building, and they couldn't figure why the seniors wouldn't vote for it. Well, the seniors are like, well, I'm barely staying in my house now. If we do this, then my taxes are gonna go up even more. So really, our only option is we've got to tackle trying to, cut the budget. We have to stop spending. That's the only way you're gonna cut taxes. If you're spending this much, you have to pay this much. There's no other way around it. If you're the only town that's getting state aid, then you make out, because the other towns ain't taking advantage of it. So that's what everybody's trying to do. But then everybody gets on the bandwagon and gets some money from the state, and then we're all still paying it. So that's really what it boils down to is it's very simple. You have to cut the spending. Thank you.
Thanks. Michelle?
I guess, Scott, I agree with what you said. And, one of the things I looked at when I was going through, getting ready for the meeting tonight was I went into the CPA practice advisor. I don't recommend reading that as a rule, but taking a look at where is Maine in aggregate, and Maine is number 5 in the total country on total tax burden. So we are literally one, California's 4, and everyone's always talking about California. We're number 5. When you take a look at property tax, we're like in the top 5. On individual income tax, we're in the top, and on total sales and excise tax, we're in the top. So we have a poor state overall. We have a huge amount of infrastructure to support, and only 1.3 million people. But I mean, unless you can come up with some really good revenue generators, I mean, the only thing you can do is manage spending. But I mean, it's pretty scary to think that, and this isn't just on Scarborough, Tom, but it's like taking a look statewide, you know, being in the top 5 for the worst tax burden is not a place we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can, and I'm sure we'll have full workshops to drill down on this further. I will just say briefly before we move on that I certainly, and I think we all probably agree that these things aren't mutually exclusive, and I think we're all cognizant of our fiduciary responsibility on behalf of taxpayers, and we have a very transparent, rigorous process for determining our town budgets. We also have a town-based, you know, as evidenced partly on past community surveys, that really appreciates and expects a certain level of services. And it's a dynamic community, which I think, you know, is a great thing, but, you know, those come with challenges. So I think I appreciate staff's efforts and, you know, the council's efforts to continue to look at how we can maybe move the needle a little bit on some of these bigger picture, macro structural challenges, while also continuing to be thoughtful about spending. So if there are no other comments on the town manager's report, we'll move on. Next item is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. We're obviously still in a little bit of a transition period here, and we do have the appointments later on our agenda, but if anybody has anything to report, go right ahead. Start down here. Okay.
I just quickly, I don't have anything separately for communications, and wanted to review our Cake with Counselors events. We're about halfway through the schedule that we have. It's gone, from my perspective, very well. I was saying to somebody tonight that at first I was disappointed with the turnout. You know, there would be probably our high was about 20 people. And but it turned out to be very effective, I think. There was particularly, there was one that we did at the community center at the hub, and it was a small group. But what I really enjoyed about it was that the individual community members were also talking to each other and discussing things and layering on points that somebody else made. So I really felt that was very good. Michelle and I did one with the Link Business Networking Group, which was an interesting perspective. They're kind of connected to Chamber of Commerce, and obviously they came at it from a business standpoint, and they see some value in some of the goals of 1829. They saw opportunities maybe for workforce housing and some things like that. So it was great to get a different perspective there, and I appreciate everybody that's all of you that are coming out and doing it, and I'd like to think we could keep moving along with that. I think if we made it a regular event, that would probably increase the attendance as well. And there was the last thing was there was some comments from a few people saying, could we offer some of the dates and times to be during the daytime, because they couldn't necessarily make it at night. But overall, it's going great. I appreciate all the help.
Thanks. Karen,
Yeah.
anything? No?
I was just gonna piggyback on that and
Say, I agree with everything Larry said. John and I did one at the library, I think a week ago. Yeah, right before Thanksgiving. And same thing, we had, I think, 8 people, but a very active, engaged group. And what was really interesting is we had a few people in the group that have lived in town like 50 plus years. And then we had somebody from Eastern Village who moved in to Scarborough in March and had lived in the Boston area. So it was just a really rich conversation. And, really good feedback from everybody, but I thought that the, sort of dichotomy of the group, just, I don't know, made it more rich.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think we're gonna hopefully have a comms committee scheduled for December 18th after these are done. So I think it will be good to kind of review the learnings of what we heard, because I know Larry started a document. So I'd encourage you guys, if you haven't looked at it, just to read what's already in there. And then I think as the new comms committee, we can figure out what we want to do with that information, how we package that for the council, or do a real report out to the public in terms of the things we've heard and learned. And then also have the conversation of how do we evolve this, because I love doing it and I want to keep doing it, but I don't know if I can keep eating cupcakes. We might have to do like pizza with the counselor or something, because bad for my blood sugar.
I think protein bars with counselors isn't gonna go as well.
We have a simmering too.
Stop for that.
And I was neglectful not to give John credit for the theme of Cake with Counselors. He certainly was the author of that, so.
Bill?
The only committee that met, since the last meeting was the Sustainability Committee, and it met today. It talked about LD 1870 and Climate Superfund law, and was agreed that I would confer with Corey on where we might go as a council in terms of this effort at some climate control. We also talked about the State Transportation Department advancing the expansion of bus service in Scarborough and the micro transit idea. And I saw some material out there in the lobby touting that, a 5-year subsidy by the state to test ideas on demand, pickup, drop off, and an interesting proposition, which I think we all are going to be very interested in seeing how it's going to develop. Fascinating idea. And that was it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing how that unfolds. None of my committees or boards have met since the last meeting. I did have the opportunity to take part in one of the Cakes with Counselors events week before last. It's the one at the Hub. And I echo a lot of what Larry and Michelle said. Hearing from some of the community participants, it was really, I think it was beneficial for us, but I think they really appreciated the opportunity to engage in some real conversation. We have our public meeting rules, for a reason, and we have to be able to kind of move through our agenda, but I think folks are sometimes understandably feel limited that they only get 3-minute bites at the apple during the meeting. So it was good to have some real give and take there. We had one that was scheduled for last evening that got snowed out, which I believe is rescheduled for next week on the 15th at State Manufactured Homes, if I'm not mistaken. So again, thanks to Larry and others for spearheading those. So now moving on through the agenda. We do not have any resolutions or proclamations, no public hearings, no old business. Under new business, order number 25-115 is the first reading, and schedule a second reading on the 2026 bond order for municipal and school capital improvements. And I will hand this over to the finance director.
I think Tom was going to tee it up.
Let Tom tee it up.
Just a historical context, if you will. It has long been the practice of this town to kind of annual borrowing, kind of long-term borrowing to fund our capital investment plan. And for the first 15 years or so of my tenure here, we did that pretty consistently every year. Typically, it's in the $4 to $6 million range is where that tends to fall. Due to a series of events, one was the fact that we had a delayed audit, and without that, we couldn't go to the bond market. And then also the transition to Norm, we kind of got out of cycle slightly, and so we're now kind of getting back on cycle, if you will. So I mentioned that because this is a kind of larger issue than normal, but it's really a function of us kind of not doing it on the same sort of cadence that we have historically. Within this year is a bit different, as I mentioned earlier. Part of this borrowing will be the first borrowing for the new school project. And we've got some strategies we'd like to bring forward. It's part of this proposal, and we'd like to test that a little further with the Finance Committee next week. So with that, Norm Kildell's here to explain it a bit further.
Thanks. Tom gave me a chance to adjust the microphone after Nina was up here, so. Yeah, as Tom mentioned, this is a large issue, and our strategy on this one is to split it into two series. We'll have a Series A, which is our routine CIP borrowing, and then the Series B will be the first borrowing on the school project. And that's intentional because a good example was tonight with Karen here talking about existing debt on the school and folding that into the impact fee. By splitting out this school bond, it'll be a standalone issue, and it'll be easy to go grab that information later when I'm long gone and somebody else is sitting here talking to you as finance director and providing information. The other thing is that we're on a track to sell these bonds in January, and that's intentional because as our municipal advisor, Joe Couture, tells us, and we kind of saw that last year when we did our annual borrowing, there's a January effect in the bond market. A lot of entities have folded up after Christmas, and they've done their projects, and there's not much projects coming forward for new money in January. So for bond buyers, it's a competitive market, which we benefit from by getting a lower rate on the true interest cost. So we've flipped to go into January intentionally to take advantage of that, and also to take advantage of a current audit report. I'm thankful to tell you all I'm putting audit reports out in November and early December. So we've got fresh information for people who are interested in buying our bonds. So that's kind of the background on the schedule and the reasoning for the two different series on the bonds. And we'll get into this more in finance.
Yeah, if I just make a final point on that, the other reason for the series is that because there's probably 30 different capital projects all wrapped up into Series A, some of which we may be bonding for 5, 10, 20 years. Interest rate on those lower term is much higher than a longer term.
Yeah.
And so by separating it out, we don't want the school project to be affected, if you will, negatively affected by blending it all together. We think it really makes sense financially to separate the two.
Yeah, so as Tom said, we'll sell these separately, and we'll space them out 15 days so that they're not competing against each other in the bond market. To the projects themselves, a little description. Within the projects, we have 1.3 million that relate to the two land bond issues. We've got 1.1 which fully consumes the 2019 authorization, so that's done after we sell these. And then one of the properties is the first issue on the 2024 authorization. So Grant Road property used the very last little bit of 13,000 of the 2019 and began the usage of the 24 authorization. We've got another 1.1 million that's related to the Turf and Track project. So that was a voter approved authorization. And there were some delays on getting that done based on cost and timing and myriad of reasons, but it finally got done. So, and then like we said, the 4.7 million on the B issue is information from Kate in the school department of what Harriman's telling them that is going to be needed to get us through December 31 of 26, and that will get us cycled at that point for preparation to borrow on construction that we expect will start up in 27. So that's just a little history on the projects. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks. A final point of interest for those that have been paying attention through the years. the town consistently was carrying annual debt service or debt load of over $100 million. That was not uncommon. It was actually up into 120 in some years. We're now down to about 71 million in debt held. So I think we've done a very good job to kind of pay down our debt, if you will, and carve out space for what's coming at us. It'd be great to carve it further, but the urgency of the school project is such that we really need to advance that now. But just wanted to point that out, that that's been a point of some concern, perhaps appropriately so, that we had an extraordinary high debt burden.
Thanks. Thank you both. Before we go to council discussion, we'll open this up for public comment. If anyone would like to take 3 minutes on this. All right, don't see any takers. With that, we'll go to the council. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion. Any questions or comments?
I have I'm just, when we meet for finance, again, it would be interesting to understand what this bondage issuance means in terms of our starting point for next year's budget and how this might impact next year's budget, just in terms of
Debt service?
yeah, understanding that it might be a little bit higher than normal. So that's just kind of already starting the budget a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just understanding that, I would like to understand that when we meet.
Mhm.
And it might be good, Tom, like you mentioned, one of our financial metrics that look at our credit rating. So it would be good to understand this in light of all of those metrics as well, in terms of where we stand. And I know it might be a spoiler alert, but if we know where the unassigned fund balance is, it would be nice to know that as we're having this conversation.
Great. Anyone else? Larry?
I'm new to that whole process, but I'm curious that if it makes sense, I thought as we went through the school project, being able to communicate the tax impacts on an average home, that I thought that was a really good tool to use. And so as we're, I understand these things are approved and either voter approved or through the regular town process. But as questions come up and from the public, people want to know what's this bond for, what's that? It would be good to also be able to equate that to that same tax impact based on an average home. I just think that's a really useful tool.
Yeah, good thought. Anyone else? All right. Yeah, I just quickly add, I appreciate the work on this and the presentation and the fact that being strategic about the timing and the sequencing of it, and a couple of good comments about moving forward with this. But with that, I will take the vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, order number 25-117. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Order number 25-116. Act on the request from the tax collector for a waiver of foreclosure on the following property: 332 Garnet Drive, map T002, lot 332, and authorize the town manager to sign the necessary documentation.
Yes,
Tom?
this time of year, tax liens are coming due. The way the state law works is after 18 months, if the lien is not satisfied, foreclosure is automatic. And this action is actually to waive the foreclosure. In this case, this is a mobile home. I believe it's in the older part of Hillcrest. It's one of the old kind of remaining ones. And frankly, these aren't assets. There's in many cases liabilities. I don't mean to speak disparagingly, but it's not advantageous for us to own a property that it's very likely or possible that we would have to actually pay money to dispose of it. It's really not worth anything. It's sitting on leased land. So this is thankfully it's not all that common, but on occasion we do come and seek your permission to waive the foreclosure. The lien doesn't go away. It's just that we don't own the property.
Is anybody residing there?
I believe so. Yes. Yes.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
Denise Hamilton, Two Rod Road, not particularly on the specific item, but liens in general. How, I know of someone in our neighborhood who gets a lien put on their property every time the tax bill comes out. How many times does the town allow these people to have liens because they stretch it to that 18 months, they pay it,
Yep.
and then another lien and another lien. And that's our tax dollars paying for this over and over again. And it just seems like there has to be a limit on, and we're talking of years that I've looked back that homes have had liens put on it every once or twice a year. Thank you.
See if there are any other comments and then we can ask
Yeah, ask
staff
that.
to comment on that. Anyone else? All right.
Yeah, there's no limit as to how many. Frankly, I think some people use that as a strategy. Other people, I think, out of necessity. In any event, when a lien is placed, interest accrues. And so so they're not just doing that scot-free, they're paying interest. So there's a financial penalty of doing it that way. We also are able to cover our costs for certified mail and processing and those sorts of things. So I believe we're made whole, but you're right, there are some frequent flyers, we'll call them.
Yeah. How does that factor into the metric that we always show that shows how well we're collecting our revenue? So is that, because my recollection is we're
Yep.
still in the really high 90s, which is pretty remarkable from a collection perspective.
We're consistently above 98.5 or 99% collected. Keep in mind, we have probably 10,000 tax bills we send out. So yeah, there are some notable properties that go to lien, but you're putting that against a total population of 10,000.
Yes, the lien does not calculate into the collection rate, but yes, we're still plus 99%. I think last year we were 98.7, so we were right there. And when you read your ACFR when it comes out and you go back to the stats table and look at the collection rate in the stat table with the history, when we do collect that lien from a prior year, we do update that previous year so that that collection rate is adjusted for any liens that are collected in previous years.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this? Scott?
I have one quick thing. I know this is in Kennebunk. My sister, there's my grandmother's house down there, and the house next door has had a lien on it for like 20 years or 30 years. And the town doesn't want to foreclose on anybody. I don't think they will. They'll just let it go until finally some family members left that wants to sell it, and then the taxes, whatever is owed, out of it. If they let it go long enough, I would think it would take the whole property. So I don't know how long. I don't know how long a town goes before they're actually going to evict somebody, because I don't think we'd want to evict anybody out of that home.
There is a
Especially if they're elderly.
There is a council policy that we abide by, the premise of which is we don't want to take people's homes. We want them to stay there. You'll be surprised to hear that many times folks that find themselves in this situation, there are other circumstances that lead them there. They inherited it, they lost a job, they have illness, all sorts of heartbreaking stories. So our policy is to enter, and we do enter into payment installment agreements with them to allow them to pay it back in on manageable terms, if you will. As you might expect, if there's a huge backlog of taxes to be paid, they can take years to pay that off if they're only paying $300 a month, because in the meantime, a new tax bill is getting issued. So we do very actively work with homeowners. The last thing we want to do is take their home.
Thank you.
Isn't there,
John?
question, isn't there also a state program for seniors that allows them to not pay taxes upfront, but when they go to sell, like the situation that somebody mentioned of once it's sold, then the town gets those taxes back?
There are a number of state programs that are not terribly, they're not used terribly much, and I don't exactly know why. I think, so yes, there are programs.
Anyone else?
Yep. Tom, this sounds unique in that it's on leased property. So the only value in this particular thing is the actual home itself and.
Yes, and I don't know the particulars, but it's not uncommon to have some from the seventies and eighties, frankly, older units that depreciate. This, unlike a home that very often appreciates, these actually depreciate like a car. as soon
That's
as you
my
buy it.
point, yeah, is that what, as this goes over time, and if it's unsatisfied, there's not really any value to it, so no incentive for the owner really to come current.
Other than pride and responsibility, which
Yeah.
is a big thing. And most
Okay.
people, you'd be surprised, again, they find themselves, they're not derelict. There's all sorts of heart-wrenching stories of why people find themselves in these situations.
Right, don't get me wrong, I'm
Yeah.
not pushing that we do it, I'm just saying that for this particular case, it almost doesn't warrant, if I'm in favor of not pushing somebody out of their home,
Mhm.
but then I don't see an incentive for anybody to become whole on this either, and I think we should just kind of accept that.
Yeah, there are cases where the council will hear poverty hardship abatements and have in fact granted them, which you have the ability to waive those and make them go away forever. Again, thankfully that happens infrequently, but every couple of years, you'll sit as a body and consider such a request.
Anyone else? Right? No, I appreciate the discussion and the additional information and context, and I definitely support this approach. And with that, I will call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Now moving on to order number 25-117, act on the recommendations of chair council appointments. So I appreciate everyone's feedback and understanding as we've worked through this over the past couple of weeks. I'm not planning to, unless anyone wants me to, I wasn't planning to read all of these.
No.
I don't know that we need to filibuster that way and take up any more time. This is a single action item, so it's just one vote. And then that'll be confirmed, and we'll be able to convene these committees and get on with all that important work. Does anyone have any additional questions or comments? All right, with that, I will call the vote. All in favor? Oh, sorry. We do have the opportunity for public comment. All this was posted with the agenda online publicly, and certainly if anyone wants to speak to it, now's your chance. All right, thank you.
You should have a motion.
Yeah. I
We
move
should
to
have
put
a
it on the
motion.
floor.
Yes. All right. Any further discussion? Thank you. All in favor? That's unanimous. Or, no.
I'm opposed because I am.
Are you opposed or abstaining?
Hey, whatever you want.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the point of order. We have no non-action items, so we will move on to council member comments. Michelle.
It goes back to the committee assignments.
And I noticed that you're actually assigned to the Senior Advisory Board, which is currently inactive. And the group that John and I met with at the library, there was a lot of energy around that committee. And we explained to them we had one that just no one had really expressed a lot of interest. So I think that one of the dilemmas that we were discussing was how do we get information out there? How do we get, that opportunity out to seniors? Because it was interesting as they were saying, we want this, and we're like, well, we have this.
Mhm.
So just kind of something to think about on that.
Yeah, I think I had heard that as well. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
So I'm not
pouching
sure
that
you're
there.
an active, Corey. I
There
think
were-
you're gonna have
yeah.
you're gonna have a
No.
group.
There were a couple of these that were noted on there that had sort of gone dormant, and so that will be something to pursue, and to the extent that there are groups that
Yep.
seem to remain dormant, then that will be up to the Rules and Policies Committee
Yeah.
to determine kind of how to approach that going forward. But that's a good point.
We'll work
Yeah.
on that. My only other comment is, and it's just kind of following up on what Richard said at the podium, which is LD 1829, which we keep talking about, but I like what I heard Tom say, which is if, you know, we're really not getting anywhere with a larger group, that we just need to like take action and move forward. And I think we have enough energy even here to say, you know, how do we build sort of the platform or foundation for it? And then let maybe other people from other towns want to join us when we sort of kind of start the process.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
So just to Michelle's comment on the senior committee, what we ended up learning was that while the senior advisory committee, which really focused on recreation for seniors, is kind of dormant, the senior recreation, I don't know exactly what the title is. Active Adults runs an age-friendly group, which was
Yeah.
also brought up
Yeah.
at our meeting, and that seems probably the better group. And so I did suggest maybe, and again, it'll go to rules and policy, like maybe there's a council liaison to that group.
Yeah.
And any individuals who are interested in bigger topics around seniors really should go to that group, because that's really looking at a lot of the types of things that were discussed at that meeting, like infrastructure,
Yeah.
crosswalk, like,
Yeah.
so transit, very different than what the scope is of that current committee. So I think that that exists. And so that's probably a really good thing for us to point seniors to who want to be engaged. I know Jim is in the audience, and I talked to him before the meeting saying if he's interested in that the age-friendly group is probably a really good place to start.
Great.
And I also agree with Michelle, like similar to what we did for the connector, you know, I think it always takes somebody to start being the vocal leader. We started that a little bit with the GP-COG meeting that we had, which again, I think the outcome of that was, well, let's wait and see what happens in rulemaking. Rulemaking has happened. It doesn't look as, or at least we've seen some of the draft stuff that Autumn shared. It's not as impactful, I think, as I was hoping. So, you know, if it's the will of the council, I'm willing to step up and be part of the movement that we need to create to try and drive something here. And again, I think I want to do it collaboratively with our legislative delegation, because I think we need their support. And so that's why I urged earlier that we should really try and get them here to have that conversation, because I think it's going to require them also stepping up as well to help with any changes or things that we would like to see happen.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I agree on the LD 1829 approach, and leadership's had some conversations with Tom and Liam about what staff can do to help support that, including looking at what some other towns with certain comparable characteristics have done. GP-COG, I think the email went out to everyone late this afternoon. There was an email that kind of synthesized some feedback that they had gathered from towns, including Scarborough, Wyndham, and others. And there were some themes and some comments that came out of that. So I think, you know, that it may be something, and we'll have to see how it unfolds. And we do want to be proactive about it, but I could see it potentially unfolding at a couple of levels. Something that's, you know, really Scarborough initiated and Scarborough specific. I agree, ideally in coordination with our Augusta delegation, and then maybe supplemented by collaborative efforts through GP-COG. Because those, you know, to the point that Tom made earlier, as opposed to MMA, which really, you know, encompasses the whole state, GP-COG really focuses more on Greater Portland, obviously, by definition. So we hear that loud and clear that there's a real desire to move forward with that, something along those lines. Just a couple of other comments. First of all, just at a housekeeping level, as Tom mentioned, there'll be a workshop with senior town staff next Monday, the 8th, and that's really to sort of help set the stage for our council goal making and really hear from staff about their goals and accomplishments and bandwidth, so to speak. And I've only been through this cycle once, but I found that helpful last year. And then we will have the goal setting on Saturday, January 10th. I believe it'll be in the morning. We'll figure out those details, but I appreciate everyone's feedback on availability for that and willingness to devote half of a weekend day to do that. I also just want to briefly mention that Councilor Kane and I had the opportunity this afternoon to attend the Scarborough Fire Department's graduation ceremony over in the Public Safety Building. It was their largest graduating class in their history, 10 new firefighters. Really, really cool, really moving ceremony that involved family members, and there were some instances of kind of multi-generational service there. And as the department has outlined, this really enables them, you know, with the support of the council and staff, other staff to really expand their service and really kind of keep up with our needs. So glad to have the opportunity to witness that today. And to second what Nina said, I think the lights look great, and I appreciate
They do look
Tom
great.
arranging for snow as well.
Yeah. That's ambiance.
Definitely takes it to another level. Any other councilor comments? No? With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.